couldn't place her, but I knew I had. I ran through every woman I'd met, family, friends, work, the gym, discarding one after another. But there was something about her that kept nagging at me. I was sure I knew her. It bugged me. I hated unsolved puzzles like this because my brain would obsess over it until 3 a.m., waking me up with the answer. I watched her stow her coat in the overhead bin, her eyes briefly meeting mine. She smiled faintly, but there was no recognition in her gaze. Maybe I was mistaken. But no, I was convinced. She looked familiar, and that feeling wouldn't go away. I slumped in my seat, cursing the receptionist who'd given me a middle seat when I'd asked for an aisle or window. She, on the other hand, had the window seat, like always. I studied her, trying to place where I knew her from. As she dug through her purse and pulled out her phone, I peered through the gap between the seats. I respected her privacy, so I looked away when she typed in the PIN code. When I glanced back, my heart skipped. The phone screen displayed a smiling man I recognized immediately. Jonathan Carstairs, head of our engineering department. He was the guy who had been my mentor, who had helped me climb the corporate ladder. I couldn't believe it. This woman was Jonathan's wife, Priscilla. I smiled to myself, satisfied with solving the mystery. We had met years ago at work events, but she hadn't remembered me. Not surprising. Priscilla always preferred to socialize with the management crowd, not the grunt workers like me. If she'd been sitting next to me, I might have reminded her, but I wasn't about to make the situation awkward now, especially since she was seated ahead of me. I tried to distract myself with a crossword puzzle, but then something caught my eye. Her phone screen wasn't showing Jonathan anymore. Instead, a younger, much different man appeared, black with his jeans unbuttoned, and a selfie pose. The words on the screen flashed at me. "Hurry up, lover." A wave of anger washed over me. She was cheating on Jonathan. I couldn't believe it. I'd seen how devoted Jonathan was, how much he loved his kids and grandkids, all of whom were adopted. The guy didn't deserve this betrayal. There were no excuses. If she was unhappy, she should have fixed the problem or walked away. But this was just wrong. I tried to ignore the urge to act, but old instincts kicked in. I reached for my pocket, not for a pen, but for my phone. I wasn't sure what to do with the photos I had taken. Should I send them to Jonathan now? He had suffered so much before. His first wife's betrayal had nearly destroyed him. I didn't want to be the one to ruin him again, but I couldn't just sit back either. As I sat there, conflicted, my gaze fell on her left hand. She had taken off her rings and covered her finger with a Band-Aid. Maybe she thought it made her look less guilty. To me, it was just a pathetic attempt at hiding the truth. Jonathan deserved so much more than this. I knew him well enough to know he would never forgive her if he found out. It would destroy him, and I wasn't sure I could live with that. My mind wandered back to my own history, my bitterness towards deceitful women. Memories of drunken arguments, betrayal, and revenge plans came flooding back. I snapped another picture of her phone screen and zoomed out to capture her profile, unsure of what to do with it. Part of me wanted to send everything to Jonathan immediately, but another part hesitated. He had been devastated by his first wife's actions. I knew how hard it had been for him to trust anyone again. I didn't want to be the one to make him relive that pain. But what if I didn't act? What would happen to Jonathan then? I sat back, unsure of the next step. I tucked my phone away, not wanting the guy sitting next to me to notice I was taking pictures of Priscilla. The flight dragged on, each glimpse of her stirring more anger in me. I couldn't help but wonder, was this just a one-time slip, her first infidelity? Or was I witnessing the end of a long affair? I kept replaying the details in my head. A photo of a younger man on her phone, a Band-Aid covering her ring finger, and the faint outline of an engagement ring. My initial anger softened, replaced by a grim sense of duty. Jonathan deserved the truth, but I couldn't bring myself to be the one to deliver it. He had suffered enough, and after everything he'd done for me, how could I destroy him now? Jonathan had always been there for me, and it hurt me to think about his heart breaking again. I owed him too much to turn him into another casualty of betrayal. I thought about what I would want if the roles were reversed. I want the truth to just disappear. So that's what I decided. Priscilla would have one final chance to prove her loyalty, and I wouldn't intervene unless it was absolutely necessary. But I still had unanswered questions. Was Priscilla just looking for an escape, or was she planning something far worse? If I confronted Jonathan now, would it even matter? He was nearing retirement and deserved peace. So, I devised a plan that would allow Priscilla to decide her fate, while minimizing the damage.
I turned my focus to the images on my phone. Paul's toned body, his confident smirk. He was everything Jonathan wasn't: young, fit, and full of lust. Our brief affair was thrilling in a way I couldn't describe with Jonathan. With Paul, everything was raw, no tenderness, just desire. And yet it was over quickly. 2 nights of passion, fueled by the rush of a forbidden connection. Paul was gone now, but the memory of those nights lingered.
As the plane finally landed, I joined the rest of the passengers heading for baggage claim, positioning myself behind Priscilla. I wasn't sure if she'd notice me or not, but I didn't want to take any chances. She was focused on the exit, tapping her foot impatiently, checking her watch. She didn't recognize me, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that everything was about to unravel. As the first bag began to roll down the carousel, Priscilla's attention shifted from the luggage to the exit. Her face lit up and she waved. I couldn't help but laugh under my breath. Her partner looked younger than I remembered her husband to be. I waited for their reunion to reveal if this was their first meeting, or just another rendezvous in a long string of them. My heart sank. The couple showed no signs of guilt or hesitation, just pure affection. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I making the right call? Jonathan, in his 60s, deserved better than this. I couldn't let his wife continue to betray him, so I snapped a photo of their embrace and tucked my phone away, walking over to them. As their lips met, I lightly touched Priscilla's shoulder. The sound of their kiss made my stomach turn. I still couldn't understand how someone could betray their partner so ruthlessly. Even after witnessing so many affairs, it still stung. "I'm sorry," I muttered, half to myself. When Priscilla turned to face me, I saw the confusion in her eyes as she tried to place me. She didn't recognize me, which I found both satisfying and sad. I stood firm. Who I am isn't important, but who you are and who you're married to, that matters. Her lover, Paul, interrupted, claiming she was divorced and had been for years. Priscilla quickly reassured him that she was just living separately from Jonathan, who wasn't accepting the end of their marriage. I watched him, unsure, but decided to let Priscilla make her choice, unprompted by her lover. "Give me a moment with Dave," Priscilla said smoothly, still trying to control the situation. I raised an eyebrow. "Dave," I replied. "Please, give me a minute," she urged. I could see she was good at playing the part, and yet I was still determined to confront her. I wasn't fooled. The pressure to choose was now on her. "Priscilla," I said, "you have a choice to make, Jonathan or your lover. You can save your marriage, but only if you choose wisely." Her face drained of color. The confident woman I had seen moments before seemed to crumble. For the first time, I saw the real Priscilla, the one struggling with the consequences of her actions. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked, voice trembling. "Nothing if you don't want to," I said. "I'm giving you the chance to save what's left of your marriage." I gave her until 4:30 p.m., Melbourne time, to contact me and prove she was back in the city. Otherwise, I would send the photos and letter I'd prepared for Jonathan. Priscilla's eyes widened in panic. "Please, don't do this," she begged. "Jonathan will be devastated," I replied coldly. I handed her my business card. "You have 3.5 hours to make things right. If you call me by then, I'll keep your secret. But if not, I'll make sure Jonathan knows the truth." Her shoulders slumped and I could see her mind racing. "Please don't let him find out." I nodded, a grim smile on my face. "This is your choice, Priscilla. Make it wisely." I watched as Priscilla took my business card, read it, and finally seemed to grasp who I was. She swallowed, then met my gaze, eyes full of apprehension. I gave a slight nod. "Yes, I'm that Dave." The moment she remembered, I saw it in her face. She knew. The realization hit her hard, and I could feel her anxiety. The chauffeur holding my sign caught my eye, and I waved at him. When I turned back, Priscilla was lost in thought. Her lover, Paul, approached her. I checked my watch. I didn't have time to stand around and watch their little drama unfold. My meeting was waiting. From here on out, Priscilla's choices would determine her fate and Jonathan's.
As for Paul, after I confronted her, he ceased to exist. I didn't even bother explaining myself to him. "Lose my number," I told him as I focused on the one thing that mattered, saving my marriage. I realized that my affair with Paul had been a way to close a chapter I'd never understood. It all stemmed from my first husband, Jerome, who left me when I was still in love with him. I never got the answers I needed, and Paul reminded me of that lost piece. The affair was my attempt to find closure, but it wasn't love, it was just escape. The guilt hit hard now. Dave's words made me realize that all my justifications for cheating were empty. I looked around, my bag still missing. Forget the lingerie, the dress, the charger. I had bigger things to worry about. I dropped my luggage at the counter, trying to keep my cool. Memories of my childhood filled my mind. Growing up with a cold, distant father who disapproved of everything I did, including my marriage to Jerome, a man he despised. I'd been disinherited for choosing love over his approval. My frustration grew as I watched a man in a suit fume at the counter. The couple ahead of him didn't speak English well, and he was visibly irritated. It made me angry too, but I realized I was wasting time. I'd been standing at the wrong airline counter. I took off my heels, ignoring the looks, and hurried to the Virgin Australia desk, deciding I couldn't afford any more delays. "I need a ticket for flight 512 to Melbourne," I said, breathless. The clerk nodded and handed me my boarding pass. With no checked luggage, I sprinted to the gate, clutching my purse to my side. It felt like a scene from a movie, and for a moment I wished it were. Wished I could escape my reality. But it wasn't a movie. The guilt was real. Would fate punish me for my actions? I moved quickly, trying to avoid the consequences of my choices, but all I could do was pray it wouldn't be too late. I groaned when I saw the security line. Of course, I picked the slowest one. I tossed my purse into the tray and tried to hurry through, knowing my studded shoes would set off the alarm. I was ready to go through when the metal detector beeped. "Please remove your belt, ma'am," the officer said. Frustrated, I quickly slipped it off and threw it in the tray. Finally, I made it through without a problem, not even noticing I hadn't put my belt back on. I tucked it into my purse with my shoes and ran toward the gate. I was grateful for the time I spent on the treadmill with my trainer as I sprinted to the gate. The flight attendant smiled when I handed over my boarding pass. "You're right on time. Please use the back ramp for seat 23B. Breathless, I shoved my shoes back on and awkwardly adjusted the straps. At least most passengers were already seated, which made finding my spot easier. I sank into my seat, relieved. I made it. This flight would get me to Melbourne at 3:15, just in time to contact Dave and stop the truth about my affair from coming out. I turned to see who was sitting next to me, just a young mom with a baby and her little girl. Her curls reminded me of my daughter Carly, who also had dark, silky curls when she was a child. Thinking about Carly as a baby took me back to when I was struggling to make ends meet after she was born. Jerome, my first husband, didn't work, and we had barely enough income to survive. But I was happy. Even after we moved from my father's mansion to a tiny trailer, there was love in that small home. I had Jared, and even though things were tough, I never complained. I was just grateful. But then Jerome left. He'd always been restless, always talking about the outback, and one day without warning, he was gone, along with everything valuable, including my grandmother's brooch. He drained our bank account, left us in debt, and abandoned me with the kids. That's when Jonathan found us. The intercom snapped me out of my thoughts. The flight was delayed by 30 minutes because of a no-show passenger, and I couldn't help but fume. "Screw the rules," I muttered. I couldn't believe everyone had to wait for one person's luggage. My hands tightened around my purse as I forced myself to relax. What's the worst that could happen, I told myself. I'd still have time to contact Dave. I thought about Jonathan, the first time I met him. He was kind, warm, and genuinely concerned. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" he asked. I started crying, telling him everything. He just listened and quietly reassured me. Jonathan helped me pack up the little we had left and drove us to a new place, never once judging me. He gave me a fresh start when I had nothing left. Now, all I had to do was make sure I didn't ruin everything. Tears filled my eyes as I recalled Jonathan squatting down to give Carly and Jared ice cream cones. He told them to sit under the elm tree while we packed up what little we had. He drove us to his home, which had a small apartment for my grandmother in the back. After settling us in, he went shopping, filling the fridge like it was Christmas. I hadn't seen such a full pantry since I left my father's house. It wasn't until we'd been living with him for a few weeks that I found the courage to ask why he'd been at the park that day. "I was about to rent an apartment for my grandmother," he explained. "And I saw you." He could see the panic in my eyes. I still remember the tight feeling in my chest. "Don't worry, Priscilla," he reassured me, patting my arm. "Having you and the kids here is much better. Now I come home to a clean house and home-cooked meals." His kindness hit me hard. Not once did he treat me like a charity case. He trusted me, gave me keys to his house, shopping accounts, and even a small allowance. I could have betrayed him in so many ways, but instead, I stabbed him in the back after almost 30 years. Facing the truth of my actions felt unbearable. I kept telling myself it was just a brief affair with Paul. No love involved, just closure. Jonathan would never know, and I would make it right somehow. I hoped he never found out. The announcement of a 40-minute delay jolted me from my thoughts. I checked the weather for Melbourne, hoping there wouldn't be any more delays. The forecast said sunny showers possible, so I relaxed a little. I still had time to contact Dave and prevent the truth from coming out. What had I really done wrong? Nearly 30 years of a stable marriage, and I had one brief affair. It didn't change how I felt about Jonathan. He didn't deserve to know, not when it wasn't a threat to him or our family. If he ever found out, I'd throw myself at his mercy and beg for forgiveness. He loved me, and I believed he would forgive me. But what if he didn't? What if he left me, especially with the prenup hanging over us? The thought terrified me. But I couldn't imagine Jonathan abandoning me, especially after all he'd already done for me. He was my knight in shining armor, not some vengeful figure. Then I thought about Carly and Jared. If Jonathan left me, the kids would disown him. He won't risk losing them, I thought. He loves them too much. My thoughts drifted back to memories of Jonathan with the kids, building a playground for them, pushing them on swings and playing in the pool. He was a wonderful father and grandfather. He'd never miss a soccer game or birthday. He loved them all, and they loved him in return. If I lost Jonathan, it wasn't just me who would suffer. It would be the kids, too. He couldn't afford to lose them. Family meant everything to him. The more I thought about it, the more I realized. I would do whatever it took to win Jonathan back and restore his trust. I couldn't lose him. Not now, not after everything we'd built. I glanced at my watch again and groaned. I could feel the tension rising in my chest as the delay dragged on. The pilot's voice broke through my thoughts. More delays. A medical flight had arrived, and now we were stuck on standby. My stomach sank. I gritted my teeth and prayed the delay wouldn't last much longer. "Please, just 20 minutes, I whispered. That would give me enough time to contact Dave before it was too late. Minutes ticked by like hours. I felt trapped, watching the seconds slip away. 15 minutes, I muttered. It was too close. Frustration bubbled over as I grabbed the stewardess. "When are we landing?" I demanded. "These delays are getting ridiculous. I can't be late for my meeting." She smiled, unfazed. "Ma'am, we're waiting for a flying doctor's flight. It's life or death, and aviation rules mean we can't land until we get clearance. We appreciate your patience." Which, I thought, forcing a smile. I fidgeted with my watch, counting the seconds, each one slipping away too fast. A new announcement came over the intercom, another 20-minute delay. I couldn't help the curse that slipped from my lips. Embarrassed, I lowered my head and stared at my watch. At best, I had 15 minutes to get to a phone. At worst, only 5. I needed to reach Dave. I grabbed my purse from under the seat, my hands shaking as I searched for my phone. "I'll text him," I told myself. The phone was buried at the bottom, and I struggled to pull it out, my panic building. The screen was dark. No, I muttered, pressing the power button. Nothing. Why didn't I charge it? Why didn't I bring the charger? My mind raced. I should have charged my phone. I could have half explained to Jonathan that I missed his calls, but now I was facing this panic without a backup. Please let us land soon," I whispered. I stared at the flight attendants, hoping for any sign of when we would arrive. Each minute dragged, and I could feel my nerves unraveling. The minutes ticked by, 4:05, 4:09, 4:12. Panic tightened its grip. I didn't want to fight Jonathan in court. I didn't want to explain things to my children. I just wanted my life back, where Jonathan looked at me with love and affection. 4:17. Finally, the announcement came. We were landing. I grabbed my purse, desperate to be first off the plane. The wheels hit the ground with a satisfying thud, and the sound of the engines reversing felt like a release. The fasten seatbelt sign lit up, and I jumped out of my seat, heading straight for the back of the plane. I didn't care what anyone thought. I had to get off and find a way to fix everything. The weight of it all pressed down on me, and I felt the anxiety pulse through my veins. The other passengers avoided my gaze. They probably thought I had lost my mind. They weren't wrong. I rushed out of the plane like it was a lifeline, sprinting down the stairs to the terminal. My eyes darted around, desperately searching for a payphone. Ignoring the curious stares of passengers, I pushed forward, hoping to find one quickly. As I neared the main terminal, I spotted it. A payphone, finally. I sighed in relief and picked up the pace, almost crashing into the booth. It accepted both credit cards and coins. Thank goodness. I fumbled through my wallet, cursing myself for not being prepared. $4.29, I muttered, inserting my Visa and holding Dave's card in my other hand. But the machine's recorded message hit me like a punch. Credit card payments are temporarily unavailable. Please use coins. My frustration boiled over. All I had were a handful of coins, 50, 20, and 10 cents, and I prayed it would be enough to connect to Dave. I dialed his number, but it went straight to voicemail. Dave, I'm in Melbourne. I froze. My time was up. No, this couldn't be happening. My legs gave out and I collapsed, holding onto the phone booth for support. The weight of it hit me like a ton of bricks. Dave was already talking to Jonathan, telling him everything. I could picture Jonathan's face, his grief-stricken eyes, tears falling. I had only seen that look once before, when we almost lost Carly to meningitis. In that moment, I realized how deeply I loved him, how much I needed him, and now I had destroyed everything. I had spent days justifying my actions, telling myself it was for closure, but that was a lie. What had I been thinking? A younger man to make me feel attractive? How pathetic. How could I even consider fighting Jonathan in court? The idea of being against him felt wrong, selfish, and I hated myself for it. Had I become like my father? The shame twisted inside me. The clock read 4 o'clock as I stared at my laptop screen. My afternoon meeting had ended early, leaving me too much time to think. I cursed myself for not making the call sooner, for being distracted. 4:07. I checked my phone again, hoping for some sign, any sign, that things could still be fixed.
To pass time, I started jotting down every flight number that Priscilla could possibly be on. One by one, I crossed off each flight that had already landed. The list kept shrinking, and with every check, my anxiety grew stronger. Please, just don't make me be the one to destroy my friend. Please, love him enough to shield him from this pain. Please, save your marriage. 4:14, I muttered, watching the seconds tick by. My frustration bubbled up, and I could feel the weight of it pressing against me. Slowly, I lifted my coffee cup to my lips, but all I really wanted to do was throw it across the room. I fought to maintain control, even as my anger grew. Kolka, you selfish witch, I muttered under my breath. 4:19, I twisted my neck, trying to loosen the tension that had built up in my shoulders. It didn't help. I stood up, pacing the cramped space of my temporary office, but that only seemed to make the pressure in my chest worse. I glanced back at the clock. 4:23. My eyes fixed on the flight status monitor. The last flight from Brisbane to Melbourne had finally landed. I sighed deeply. Everyone else had been on the ground for at least half an hour, and here I was, still stuck in limbo. Call, damn it! I cursed aloud, my frustration spilling over. I began pacing faster, needing something to release the bottled-up anxiety. My temporary office, small and suffocating, felt like it was closing in on me. I needed to do something to regain control. Push-ups, focus. I needed to focus. If Priscilla truly cared about saving her marriage and protecting Jonathan, she should be in Melbourne by now. If she had already called, then I wouldn't have to be the one to break the news. If she hadn't called, it meant she was still in Brisbane, choosing to stay with her lover instead of working to fix her marriage. The possibility of that made my stomach churn. The thought gnawed at me, a sickening twist that wouldn't let go. Then it hit me. Had I made a mistake? What if she had been using this time to plan her exit? Is this her way of walking away? 16. I shook my head and forced myself to stop. The truth was too painful to face. I dropped to the floor and did 20 push-ups, my mind focusing on one thing. I was going to help Jonathan through this. No matter what it took, emotionally, financially, whatever, he would not face this alone. 4:29. Another curse slipped from my lips. I turned back to my laptop, logging in, but my mind kept racing. The email window popped up in front of me, the cursor blinking expectantly. My finger hovered over the send button. I couldn't do it. I couldn't break this news to Jonathan through an email, not like this. 4:30. Time felt like it had slowed down. I stared at the screen, my finger still poised above the button. 4:31. I couldn't hold it any longer. I grabbed the phone and dialed Jonathan's number. "Hey Dave, how's Brisbane?" His voice came through, and it made it hard to focus. I swallowed, pushing my emotions down. "Jonathan, I've got some bad news. I really wish I didn't know." The words barely came out, heavy and thick with the weight of what I had to say. Silence. "You still there?" "Yeah." "Spit it out." "Did we lose the contract?" he asked, his voice full of hope, assuming this was just about business. I closed my eyes. "No, it's not about work. It's about Priscilla. She was on the same flight as me this morning. She was sitting right in front of me." And then I told him everything about the photos, the affair, the choice I'd given her, and her decision. Throughout it all, Jonathan was silent, his end of the line a void, his absence louder than any words he could have said. When I finished, I asked if he wanted copies of the photos and if he agreed with the actions I had taken. "Yes, please," he replied quietly, his voice strained. There was a long pause, and then he added, "Thanks, buddy. You're doing great. I gotta go." The dial tone clicked in my ear. I sat there, feeling the weight of his words and the guilt that surged within me. But the sadness I felt for Jonathan kept the guilt from swallowing me whole. Finally, I clicked the send button on the letter, the final act in a chain of events I couldn't undo.
I cursed myself. I was 2 states away from Jonathan, unable to comfort him. Belinda, who had been my support since Sue passed, lived only 10 blocks away. I called her, telling her the whole story. She was on her way to help, asking for Priscilla's address before calling her. "Are you okay?" The older woman's voice snapped me back to the present. "Yes, thank you," I replied, struggling to stay calm as I scanned the terminal for a payphone. I needed to call Jonathan before the letter did. It took 2 tries to find a working payphone. I was frustrated with Telstra's lack of service, but I pushed forward. First, I called Jonathan's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I couldn't leave a message. I needed to talk to him. Knowing he'd be home, I called the landline. It went to voicemail, too. My heart sank. When would I catch a break? I finally decided to come clean in person. I needed him to hear it from me first. "Jonathan, it's me, Pris. Honey, I did a terrible thing and I'm so sorry. I was stupid and I'm ashamed. I had an affair. It wasn't you. It was me. I let myself get caught up with a younger man, Paul. I only saw him 4 times. I swear. I love you, Jonathan. Please believe me. I never meant to hurt you." I paused, tears welling up. "I was going to meet Paul this weekend, but I ran into Dave. He knows. Please forgive me. I'm so sorry." I hoped he could hear the truth in my voice before the letter reached him. He made me face the truth about how awful I'd been. I couldn't undo what I had done, but I desperately wished I could go back and make different choices. "Please forgive me. Please don't leave me," I silently begged. The sound of a beeping notification snapped me out of my thoughts. Time was up. I fumbled through my purse, searching for a tissue to wipe away the tears that came with my confession. "What now, Pris?" I whispered to myself. "Home," I replied. "Get a cab. Go home and beg like you've never begged before." With a deep breath, I walked toward the exit, relieved to find a line forming at the cab stand. Of course, it was late Friday night, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry. Eventually, it was my turn. I gave the driver my address in Carlton and hoped he spoke good English. The traffic was awful, and as usual, every light seemed to turn red just as we approached. I felt like I could walk faster. I stared out the window, holding back tears, praying harder than I ever had before. I kept replaying the situation in my mind. Had my confession or Dave's revelations changed anything? I knew all too well how deeply Jonathan was hurt by his first wife's betrayal. Would he give me another chance after everything? As we neared my house, Jonathan's car was parked in the driveway. At least he was home. My legs felt heavy as I walked up the driveway, bracing myself for his anger. I deserved whatever wrath he threw at me. I could only hope that somehow I could make amends. I stood at the door, hesitating. Should I ring the bell or just walk in? I decided to use my key. This was still my house, at least until Jonathan said otherwise. Inside, the house was silent. I called for him, but no answer. Confused, I checked the kitchen, bedroom, and bathroom. He wasn't there. Panic started creeping in. Where could he be? His car was in the driveway. Maybe a friend had picked him up. I glanced out the dining room window, scanning the backyard. No sign of him. That left only one place, his office. As I stood in the doorway, I noticed something odd. The room was a mess. Papers scattered around, his chair pushed aside. Jonathan was always neat. The clutter felt wrong. Following the trail of papers, I saw the phone off the hook, which was unusual. Then I spotted an open answering machine with no cassette inside. My heart raced. Something wasn't right. I lowered my head, trying to calm my breath, but the panic was building. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something wedged under his chair. I bent down and pulled out a sticker. Lairdal HS1. What was that? I felt a chill run down my spine. I sat down at his desk and tapped on the keyboard. Jonathan hadn't logged out of his computer. I Googled the label. Oh my God, the Heart Start defibrillator. My stomach dropped. I glanced through his email. He had sent the kids a message. The word prenup caught my eye. I couldn't deal with that now. I needed to find Jonathan. He had to know how sorry I was and how much I loved him. I had to fix this. I quickly searched for the nearest hospital. Trembling, I called. My worst fears were confirmed. Jonathan had suffered a heart attack and was in the ICU. I rushed to the kitchen, grabbed my car keys, and bolted for the garage. The wait for the door to open felt like an eternity. As I typed the hospital address into my GPS, I prayed harder than ever. Please don't let him die. Please don't take him from me. Jonathan had always been strong. He was in great health, took annual physicals, and always tested well, better than men half his age. How could this happen? I didn't know who to pray to. God, Jonathan. I just prayed that he would pull through. If he did, maybe I could be the one to take care of him, to make up for everything. But what if I didn't have enough time to earn his forgiveness? The drive felt impossibly long. Somehow I made it there, in one piece and tearful, though I still can't explain how. As usual, parking at the hospital was a nightmare. Fortunately, the emergency room had clear signs, guiding me through the chaos. The nurse behind the desk barely spared a glance, slowly asking about the boy with the scraped knee, ignoring the toddler's kicks against the chair. Finally, my name was called. The nurse made a quick phone call before instructing me to wait my turn. I sat there for what felt like an hour, assuming they were busy stabilizing Jonathan. I'd grabbed a spare phone charger on my way out, and the ER had an outlet I could use. I distracted myself by Googling post-heart attack care. Stents, bypasses, all requiring weeks of recovery in bed. It wasn't exactly comforting, but it helped pass the time. The nurse woke me from my daze and led me through a door into a small office. A tired man in a white coat stood up as I entered, and beside him was a woman, likely his colleague. I sat down, steeling myself with the knowledge I'd gained, ready for the prognosis. What followed was a blur, but I distinctly heard the words, "dead on arrival." I have no idea if I actually collapsed. It felt like I was falling for ages, a rush of panic and regret flooding my mind. I couldn't think clearly, only the noise of my earlier thoughts echoing. What was the worst part of this? Then, a phone call snapped me back to reality. It was Carly, Jonathan's daughter, asking me to come over. I heard everything. That's why I didn't sleep a wink, I told her, trying to steady myself. But as the first light of dawn painted the sky, I realized I wasn't responsible for Jonathan's death. I couldn't sleep after that. I quietly got up, careful not to wake Belinda. I checked my phone, catching up on the messages I had missed. One voicemail stood out, John's message from the day before. "Thanks for being a true friend, buddy. Bye." I felt the weight of it, then crawled back into bed beside Belinda, my heart heavy as I mourned Jonathan. Belinda walked me to Jonathan's house. where we both had a good idea of what was coming. They? I asked. Yes, Jared had arrived from Perth, and together with Carly, they wanted to know what had happened to their father and figure out who to blame.
After hearing from the hospital, they were told Jonathan had passed away and their mother was still in sedation. Belinda and I pieced together the timeline for them. When she arrived at Jonathan's house, his car was parked, but no one answered the door. Bravely, she peeked through the windows and saw Jonathan lying on the floor. The back door was unlocked, so she rushed inside. Jonathan was lying on his back, holding the phone in one hand, the answering machine in the other. She checked for a pulse and found none. With a trembling hand, she began CPR, following the ambulance operator's instructions. By the time the paramedics arrived, she was nearly exhausted, having kept it up for around 10 minutes. Once they arrived, the paramedics took over, pushing furniture aside and attaching Jonathan to a CPR machine. Belinda stepped out of the room to call me. We exchanged a few words, but by the time we calmed each other down, Jonathan was on a stretcher, heading for the ambulance. I asked Belinda to return to Jonathan's office and describe what she had seen. On the back seat of her car, she had found several items: John's cell phone, a tape from the answering machine, an envelope containing a legal document, and my letter to Jonathan with attachments. Meanwhile, I was heading back to the Brisbane airport on the next flight home. When I arrived, Belinda had more news for me. While I was in the ER, she had seen someone she recognized, Priscilla. She had sat in the waiting room, fiddling with her phone. After nearly an hour, she was escorted away and didn't return. Belinda asked the ER nurse for an update, only to learn that she had been the one to perform CPR and called the doctor, confirming the details of the day's events. Even then, the information I received was minimal, limited to a vague statement that the lady is hospitalized and sedated after receiving devastating news. Our timeline, though largely speculative, gave us a picture of Jonathan's final moments. I called him at exactly 4:31, which was when he should have read my letter. The photos were still on the table, and it seemed likely that he later searched for the prenuptial agreement with Priscilla, the one legal document in the envelope. As we read through the prenup together, it became clear: the spouse guilty of infidelity forfeits their claim to marital assets, walking away with only personal property. It was no surprise, considering Jonathan's first marriage ended in a similar way. He had written a letter to his children, expressing his love for them and his grandchildren, both born and yet to be born. He also mentioned my call and email, explaining how they had found out about me. In his letter, he apologized for the divorce and warned of his firm intentions to enforce the prenup with Priscilla. Jonathan's words about her showed his deep bitterness. He promised to take care of his children and leave his assets to them, not to her. His love for them was clear, but his anger toward their mother was undeniable. They understood more about their father's pain when I shared the untold story of his first wife and my experience with love turning into resentment. It's a cruel thing to realize that what you once believed to be true was a lie. Your memories, once cherished, now tainted, your dreams shattered. Among the papers Belinda found was a signed copy of the letter, its date clear, but beside it an unreadable scrawl. We guessed that when Jonathan wrote it, he was under immense emotional distress. The situation became more real when my lawyer, who answered the phone on a Saturday, clarified a few details. By our best estimates, Jonathan's heart stopped either during or shortly after Priscilla's confession, something we only knew because Jonathan had grabbed the recorder and alerted Belinda to its existence. Once we pieced together the events, Belinda and I decided it was time to leave the siblings to their grieving. They probably wanted to talk privately. As I turned to signal Belinda, we all heard a car pull up outside. We looked toward the window, and there she was, Priscilla, stepping out of her BMW, just like in the hospital.
I slowly opened my eyes. When would this nightmare end? The sound of the front door opening and closing made me wince. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the pain. I had never felt so isolated in my life. The nightmare began with the sound of a vacuum cleaner in the hospital room. I winced at the sharp noise and slowly opened my eyes, adjusting to the brightness of the white ceiling. I blinked several times, trying to clear my blurred vision. My head ached fiercely, and it felt like my mind was wrapped in cotton. Why am I in the hospital? And then it hit me. Jonathan was gone. He was dead. I would never feel his embrace again, never see his smile or hear his laughter. The love of my life was gone. I couldn't accept it. Tears flowed uncontrollably as panic began building in my chest. It spread like wildfire, coursing up my spine. A sound like that of an animal in agony filled my ears. Only then did I realize the noise was coming from me. I thrashed, struggling against the blankets, desperate to escape the reality of it all. "Take this, Mrs. Carstairs," I heard a voice say. I turned my head, pushing the cup away. "I need to escape this new reality." "Shh, calm down. Take this and you'll feel better." My body collapsed, drained of energy, and I sank into the pillows behind me. The nurse handed me the pill cup again, and I took the medicine, my body responding to the calming effect. After a few minutes, I was calmer, no longer a threat to myself or others. The nurse patted my arm gently, suggesting I rest. "Someone will be in soon to check on you. Get some rest until then." I complied, but my heart was broken. Jonathan was gone, and my mind felt like it was failing me. Time felt irrelevant. Everything was on autopilot, but all I wanted was to be home, where I could cry in familiar surroundings. I knew I needed to talk to Carly and Jared again, but maybe it was for the best that they hadn't answered my earlier call. Seeing Carly's car in the driveway gave me pause. She must have gotten a call from the hospital. My emotions were a whirlwind. Relief that I wouldn't have to be the one to deliver the awful news, and dread about facing her, knowing she knew something about my affair. I walked up to my front door, feeling like a condemned person once again. I walked into the living room and was taken aback to find not just Carly but Jared as well. But what truly shocked me was the presence of Dave and a blonde woman, whom I assumed must be his wife. I had expected my kids to rush over and hug me, but instead they remained seated, both regarding me with judgment. I was paralyzed, feeling a deep pang in my chest. Dave and his wife stood up without a word and prepared to leave. He shook Jared's hand and gave Carly a brief hug as she thanked him for what he had done for her father. What? Thanked him for what? For hurting him? I thought. Once they were gone, Jared walked back into the living room, sat down in his usual spot, and Carly avoided my gaze the entire time. I was bewildered. Jared exchanged a glance with Carly and she nodded, signaling that he would speak for both of them. "Mom, I'm the executor of Dad's will. After discussing things with Carly and others, I've decided to uphold his final wishes and enforce the prenup you both signed, the part that leaves you with nothing." He waved the prenup in front of me, his tone cold and impassive. He only made eye contact when he emphasized the word you, his eyes burning with anger. I was confused. Yes, I had cheated on their father, so what? It happens to the best of us. But this hatred, what did they know? They knew nothing. I'd gone to Brisbane, and now they had pictures of me kissing Paul. I reacted instinctively. Forget the prenup. It only matters if I committed adultery, right? So I went to Brisbane and was caught kissing another man. What does that prove? Carly leaned forward, picked something off the coffee table, and waved it at me. Damn, I thought. It was the answering machine tape, probably the one with my confession. This was spiraling out of control. I had to calm them down. Listen, kids, this doesn't concern you, but I've done my homework. Even if I can't get this marriage contract annulled, the law is clear. Unless specified otherwise, everything your father owned passes to me through his will. Carly stood up, her eyes blazing with fury. It doesn't concern us? You evil but... Jared stepped in, embracing her tightly and whispering comforting words until her sobs quieted. He then turned his attention back to me. Maybe you're referring to the will we found in Dad's file, the one updated 5 years ago. Let me read you something. He held up a letter, Jonathan's letter to the kids from the previous day. I stood there, head bowed, as Jared read out Jonathan's final words. I flinched as the letter transformed into a barrage of anger aimed at me. The memories of how hurt Jonathan had been in his first marriage flooded back. How wary I was when I first met him. How could I have forgotten that? But my mind refused to connect the dots. Self-preservation kicked in and I fought the truth. Jared set the letter down. This letter is Dad's final wish. He signed it, making it his legal will. He glanced at me. You can challenge it in court, but Carly and I will fight you every step of the way. I looked at Carly, confused. She nodded in agreement. This couldn't be real. It just couldn't. Why? Carly pulled away from Jared, stepping closer to me. Mom, we grew up on the story of how you met Dad, how he took us in when we were homeless. In a way, that made us love him even more than if he were our biological father. He chose us. I have more memories of Dad playing with me, helping with my homework, teaching me how to ride a bike, swim, and drive than I do of you. I think Jared would say the same. But it was all him, not you. You were always too concerned with yourself, your friends, your appearance. We owe everything to him. And so do you. He loved us with everything he had. Carly's voice shook as she continued. And even you can't deny that Dave told us about Dad's first marriage and how it almost destroyed him. You were there. You knew how his infidelity ruined him, yet you still did it. I didn't think. I never thought. It just happened, I stammered. You make it sound like I'm some villain who purposely destroyed Dad. And now you're acting like Dave is your new best friend. He's the one who ended him. Jared stood beside Carly, his anger directed at me like a physical force. No, Mom. Dave didn't hurt Dad. You did. You put the knife in and twisted it. That truth cut deep, but before I could fully accept it, my defensive instincts took over, the same way a body twitches even after death. You can't believe what he wrote in that letter. He was upset, angry. Your father loved me, I protested. Jared stepped even closer. Yes, he spoke in anger, but imagine knowing you're having a heart attack. How much rage does it take to sit there and write a letter, print it out, and sign it, when you could have just called for help? That's how much those last words mattered to him. He risked his life for them. I was in disbelief. How could he die from a heart attack? He was as strong as an ox. God, just 4 months ago he had a physical, and the doctor said he was as healthy as a 40-year-old. Funny you mention that, Mom, Carly retorted bitterly, her sarcasm cutting through the air. We asked the hospital that same question. Want to know what they told us? I felt a sharp pang in my chest. Shock, Mom. Shock. Your betrayal crushed him. Your selfishness, your vanity, your foolishness, like you admitted in your confession, broke him completely. Now my children and Jared's children will never know their grandfather because of you, and I can never forgive you for that. I staggered back as if struck. Jared stepped closer, determined. I will believe to my last breath that my father's final words to us mattered more to him than surviving. I have to believe that because the alternative is too unbearable. Carly turned to him, her confusion clear. Yes, the alternative. Jared knew what betrayal felt like, knew the agony he was about to endure. But he also understood that his father had made a conscious choice not to call for help. I couldn't bring myself to believe that Jonathan chose not to be there for his children and grandchildren. The thought was too much to bear. Carly sank into the chair, her face pale. Jared gently placed his hand on her shoulder, squeezing it comfortingly, then turned his attention back to me. Mom, we're going to carry out Dad's last wish. And that's the last thing I remember for a long time. Sitting in the living room surrounded by packed boxes, I couldn't stop looking at the small plastic container that held a portion of Jonathan's ashes. I couldn't bear to focus on it for too long. It seemed surreal that something so small, so ordinary, contained the remains of someone as extraordinary as Jonathan. I needed to move. I stood and stretched, then aimlessly wandered from box to box, trailing my fingers along their edges. It felt so insignificant compared to everything we'd built together over the years. I should count myself lucky that the kids allowed me to take as much as I did. They could have made me leave with just my clothes and toiletries. I wandered to the spot where an antique sideboard once stood, now only a blank space on the wall. The outline of an old photograph from our wedding was still visible, a ghost of the past. In it, Carly was in Jonathan's arms, his hand around my waist, and Jared standing proudly in front of us. We were all smiling, radiant with happiness. The empty frame on the wall spoke volumes about the emptiness I now faced. I sighed deeply, feeling tired and defeated. The weight of my decision pressed on me. I could walk away, honoring Jonathan's last wish, hoping that one day my children would forgive me and allow me back into their lives. But that meant poverty. Without qualifications, I had no real skills besides housekeeping, and I was too old to be competitive in the job market. The other option was to fight my children in court, knowing it would cost me their love forever. I'd lose Jonathan's final wish too. Both choices felt unbearable. I could blame Dave for revealing Jonathan's suspicions, or blame Jerome for abandoning me without reason. I could even blame my mother for dying young or my father for being distant. But deep down, I knew the truth. I could finally admit it. I was the one to blame. No one forced me to fall for Paul's flattery. No one made me sleep with him, lie, and betray the man I had sworn to love forever. I made those choices on my own, and now I had to face the consequences.